Arctic Commandos, training for extreme environments. The frozen gauntlet. The Arctic is not just cold, it is merciless. Imagine stepping onto a battlefield where the very air seems to conspire against you, where the wind cuts like knives and the snow blinds with every gust. Here, every breath carries danger. In temperatures plummeting to -40 degrees Celsius and below, even the simplest human actions become ordeals. Water turns solid in minutes, metal freezes to the touch, and one lapse in judgment can mean death within the hour. This is the gauntlet that Arctic Commandos must endure. A crucible of ice and isolation where nature itself is the ultimate adversary. From the moment recruits set foot in this frozen arena, they are stripped of every comfort. Shelters become fragile against storms that can swallow entire landscapes, and visibility drops to zero under whiteouts that erase the horizon. The ground beneath their boots is a shifting enemy, ice that cracks without warning, snowdrifts that conceal hidden crevasses, and frozen lakes where silence may suddenly give way to catastrophe. For ordinary men, such conditions are unbearable. For Arctic Commandos, they are the starting line of training. Consider Norway's Ranger Battalion, forged in the unforgiving mountains of Troms. These soldiers train under perpetual darkness during the polar winter, where the sun may not rise for weeks. They patrol across frozen fjords on skis, burdened by gear that can exceed half their body weight. Their days are measured not by the clock, but by endurance. How long they can remain alert when exhaustion and frostbite gnaw at their bodies. Across the Atlantic, Canada's Joint Task Force North faces similar challenges, mastering survival in the vast, empty tundra where a single mistake can leave a soldier stranded hundreds of kilometers from safety. It is not enough to survive, they must learn to fight. Traditional tactics collapse under these conditions. Weapons seize as oil thickens in the cold. Batteries for radios and navigation die in hours. Vehicles stall as fuel crystallizes. The Arctic erodes the tools of modern warfare until soldiers are left with nothing but ingenuity, resilience, and trust in their comrades. Training here is not just preparation for combat. It is preparation for an environment that punishes hesitation and rewards only those who adapt. The first lessons are brutally simple. Protect your core temperature at all costs, keep moving, and conserve energy. Soldiers are taught to build emergency shelters out of snow, to melt ice for water without draining precious fuel, to layer clothing with scientific precision so sweat does not freeze against their skin. Every technique is a safeguard against hypothermia, a condition that lurks at the edge of every operation. But physical survival is only half the battle. The psychological assault of the Arctic is equally devastating. Endless whiteness can disorient even the most seasoned fighter, leading to snow blindness, vertigo, and the creeping terror of isolation. The Arctic's silence is deceptive. Beneath the quiet, there is a constant sense of menace. The groan of ice shifting beneath your feet, the roar of a sudden blizzard, the invisible hand of wind that can extinguish life in moments. To operate in this environment demands mental fortitude that borders on the superhuman. Soldiers are trained to embrace discomfort, to accept pain as routine, and to find clarity of thought when the body screams for retreat. Every training mission in the Arctic is a confrontation not just with the cold, but with the limits of human endurance. This is why Arctic training is often described as a purification process. It strips away arrogance and overconfidence, revealing only those who can adapt to the most hostile conditions on Earth. The frozen gauntlet does not care about rank, nationality, or experience. It is impartial in its cruelty. Those who succeed emerge not only as warriors, but as survivors hardened into something more than human. And yet, the Arctic is not just an obstacle. It is a teacher. It teaches patience, precision, and humility. It demands respect, because those who underestimate it rarely return unscathed. The commandos who rise from this environment carry within them the essence of cold weather warfare, the ability to endure, to innovate, and to fight where others would surrender. Their journey begins in silence, under the pale glow of the northern lights, in landscapes untouched and unyielding. It begins with frostbite stinging their fingers, with lungs burning from frozen air, and with the knowledge that every step forward is an act of defiance against nature itself. This is the Frozen Gauntlet, an initiation into the harshest theater of war on Earth. And for the Arctic Commandos, it is only the beginning. Survival beyond limits. To survive in the Arctic is not simply to endure the cold, it is to master it. For Arctic Commandos, survival is not a desperate attempt to stay alive, but a deliberate process of thriving where nature intends no man to last. Every element of their existence in the frozen wilderness, clothing, food, shelter, weapons, must be reimagined, tested, and adapted until the soldiers themselves become extensions of the environment. The first line of defense is equipment. Specialized cold weather gear is more than a uniform, it is a lifeline. Soldiers train in multi-layered clothing systems engineered to trap warmth while preventing deadly moisture buildup. At -40 degrees Celsius, sweat can be as lethal as a bullet, freezing against the skin and dragging body temperature into the abyss. Commandos learn to adjust layers constantly, balancing activity and insulation with meticulous care. Boots must resist frost without compromising movement. Gloves must shield fingers without sacrificing dexterity, and face masks must guard skin from windburn while allowing steady breathing. Even weapons receive their own winter uniforms. Lubricants replaced with cold-resistant oils, magazines insulated against freezing, and barrels shielded from snow and ice intrusion. Food and water, often taken for granted in temperate climates, become daily battles here. Caloric intake for Arctic operations can quadruple compared to normal requirements, with soldiers burning up to 6,000 calories in a single day of movement through snow and ice. Meals are engineered to be compact, high in fat and protein, and easy to prepare in numbing conditions. Dehydration, surprisingly, is an even greater threat than hunger. Soldiers melt snow for water, but only after learning to balance fuel reserves with necessity, because fire is both scarce and vital. A careless mistake in rationing can mean empty canteens when water is most needed, leading to swift collapse in the cold. But beyond the physical, the Arctic imposes an even greater weight on the mind. Endless horizons of white can break focus, inducing disorientation known as polar fatigue. The silence becomes oppressive, and the absence of visual landmarks creates an illusion of stagnation, as though marching in place for hours on end. To combat this, Arctic Commandos undergo specialized mental conditioning. They are taught visualization techniques, small rituals of discipline, and team bonding exercises that anchor them in reality when their senses begin to betray them. In isolation, the mind drifts toward despair. In unity, soldiers create a rhythm of resilience that pushes them forward through the monotony of snowstorms and endless night. Sleep, too, is a luxury rationed carefully. In tents dug into the snow or makeshift igloos carved from ice, soldiers rest in shifts, cocooned in insulated bags that become their only barrier against the freezing void outside. Yet even in these moments, survival demands vigilance. Carbon monoxide poisoning from heaters, frostbite from condensation, or collapse of snow shelters can transform rest into mortal danger. Commandos are trained to wake at the slightest sound, to check equipment constantly, to never let the lure of comfort erode their discipline. Weapons in the Arctic are tested not only against enemies, but against the cold itself. Steel fractures under sudden impacts, springs stiffen, and optics frost over. Soldiers practice firing drills with frozen fingers, disassembling rifles in darkness while wearing gloves, and maintaining accuracy even as their breath crystallizes into mist around the sights. Ammunition must be warmed, explosives stored carefully, and vehicles adapted with heating systems that fight the unrelenting freeze. In the Arctic, war is not only fought against an enemy, but also against entropy, as every piece of technology struggles to resist the grip of nature. The cost of failure in these lessons is steep. Frostbite can claim a finger within minutes of exposure. Hypothermia creeps in silently, numbing the body before clouding the mind until soldiers wander aimlessly in a haze of confusion. To Arctic commandos, prevention is the first and only cure. They are taught to recognize the earliest warning signs in themselves and their comrades, to intervene instantly with chemical heat packs, fire, or emergency evacuation. Trust in one another becomes the foundation of survival. No soldier is left alone in conditions that can end life so swiftly. And yet, amid these relentless trials, something remarkable occurs. Soldiers discover that survival is not merely possible, but empowering. They learn to melt snow with nothing but body heat, to find direction in blizzards using stars faintly visible through cracks in cloud, to hunt and fish in landscapes where no food seems to exist. The Arctic ceases to be a void of death and becomes instead a laboratory of human adaptation. Each small victory against the cold reinforces the soldier's confidence, forging resilience not only in body, but in spirit. To survive beyond limits is to recognize that limits themselves are illusions. The Arctic forces soldiers to abandon comfort, to confront fear, and to embrace hardship as routine. In doing so, it transforms them. No longer merely trained fighters, they become cold-weather warriors, whose greatest weapon is not their rifle or their gear, but their ability to endure what others cannot. The Arctic shapes them into instruments of survival, prepared not just to withstand the cold, but to wield it as part of their strength. This is the essence of Arctic survival, not defiance of the cold, but mastery of it. And in mastering it, Arctic commandos become something rare and formidable. Soldiers who do not merely exist on the edge of the world, but thrive in its very heart of ice. Specialized combat tactics. In the Arctic, combat is not just about defeating an enemy, it is about outsmarting an environment designed to erase all advantage. Traditional doctrines crumble under the weight of the cold. Standard camouflage becomes useless against endless sheets of white. Vehicles choke on frozen fuel. Firearms betray their operators with jammed bolts and brittle springs. In this setting, Arctic commandos are forced to reinvent the very fundamentals of warfare. They do not fight the way other soldiers fight. They adapt, improvise, and evolve until their tactics are as unforgiving as the land itself. Camouflage is the first lesson in this white battlefield. Standard greens and browns make a soldier stand out like ink on paper. Arctic commandos trade them for snowsuits patterned in subtle shades of white, gray, and pale blue. They learn to sculpt their profiles against the snow, to vanish not only with fabric, but with discipline, remaining motionless when winds pick up, moving only when snow flurries cloak their advance. Even equipment is painted or wrapped to avoid betraying a dark silhouette against the ice. In an environment where shadows travel faster than sound, invisibility becomes the deadliest weapon. Movement across snow and ice demands an entirely different skill set. Soldiers train to traverse on skis or snowshoes, conserving energy while maintaining speed. They practice dragging pulks, sleds loaded with supplies, over uneven terrain, learning how to distribute weight to avoid exhaustion. Snowmobiles provide rapid mobility, but they are loud, fuel-hungry, and prone to breakdowns in extreme cold. Sometimes the most efficient method is the oldest: dog sleds, capable of carrying supplies quietly across miles of frozen wilderness, immune to the mechanical failures that plague engines. Each mode of travel has its place, and commandos are drilled to switch seamlessly depending on mission requirements. The weapons of Arctic warfare are as much a product of environment as of engineering. Firearms require constant attention, stripped of oils that would freeze solid in sub-zero temperatures. Soldiers practice firing drills with numb fingers, training to maintain accuracy when muscle control is compromised by frostbite. Optics must be shielded from condensation, magazines warmed inside jackets, and barrels checked constantly for ice obstruction. Instructors stress that the environment is always waiting to betray the unprepared, Every shot fired in the Arctic is proof of preparation, discipline, and vigilance. Combat formations and engagements are transformed by snow. Sound carries differently in the frozen air, echoing across valleys and revealing positions far more easily than in forests or cities. To counter this, commandos move in staggered silence, using hand signals instead of radios whenever possible. They exploit the natural cover of snowdrifts and ice ridges, carving firing positions directly into the terrain. In whiteouts, visibility collapses to only a few meters, creating surreal battles fought almost blindly, where instincts and training matter more than sight. Here, hesitation is fatal, and trust in the unit becomes absolute. Ambush tactics take on new dimensions in these conditions. A team may lie buried beneath snow, invisible until the moment they rise, and unleash fire on unsuspecting foes. Explosives can be concealed beneath thin ice, detonated as enemy vehicles cross frozen rivers. Mines and traps are deployed not only against soldiers but against the environment itself. Strategic destruction of ice bridges or controlled avalanches can cripple enemy movements more effectively than any firefight. In the Arctic, the terrain itself is a weapon, and commandos wield it with lethal creativity. Transportation of supplies and heavy weapons requires its own ingenuity. Sleds are modified to carry mortars or machine guns, skis adapted to tow equipment, and drones tested for short-range surveillance despite the cold's assault on batteries. The objective is not just mobility, but sustainability. Units must move light, live off the land where possible, and ensure that every piece of gear serves multiple purposes. Efficiency is not luxury here, it is survival. Training for combat in the Arctic also includes simulated enemy engagements under conditions that replicate the worst scenarios imaginable. Commandos fight mock battles in total darkness, navigating by night vision distorted by freezing fog. They practice underwater insertions beneath ice sheets, emerging from frozen rivers with weapons ready. Helicopter insertions require coordination under high winds, where one slip on the ice can scatter an entire squad. Every drill reinforces the core truth, that war in the Arctic is not forgiving of mistakes. Psychological warfare plays its role too. To know that your enemy has mastered these tactics, that they can appear out of a blizzard unseen, strike without warning, and vanish back into the snow, plants fear in even the most seasoned opponents. The environment amplifies this terror, because in the Arctic, defeat often comes not from bullets, but from exposure. A soldier who hesitates, who falters, who loses morale, is already lost to the cold. In this unforgiving theater, Arctic commandos become both hunters and ghosts. They move with the snow, fight with the silence, and endure with a resilience honed only in the most brutal conditions. Their specialized tactics do more than counter the cold. They transform it into an ally, turning the frozen wilderness into a weapon as sharp and merciless as any blade. The human element. Pushing boundaries. In the Arctic, the greatest weapon is not technology or tactics. It is the human body and mind pushed beyond what most would consider possible. Machines falter in the cold, batteries die, engines stall, metal fractures. But human beings, when properly conditioned, can adapt in ways no blueprint or algorithm can replicate. This is where Arctic commandos distinguish themselves, through a brutal regimen that forges resilience, grit, and an unwavering will to survive. Physical conditioning is relentless. Recruits undergo endurance training that simulates the exhaustion of operating for days on end in sub-zero conditions. They run across frozen terrain with heavy packs, perform combat drills in knee-deep snow, and practice building shelters after hours of exertion with numb fingers and dwindling energy. Frostbite becomes an ever-present risk. Soldiers are deliberately exposed to cold extremes so they can recognize the first signs of tissue damage and act before it becomes irreversible. Muscles harden not just from strength training, but from repetition under constant duress, until every movement becomes second nature even when coordination begins to fail from fatigue. Breathing itself becomes a form of discipline. Inhaling sub-zero air scorches the lungs and saps stamina. Soldiers train to regulate breathing, conserving energy while keeping oxygen intake steady during exertion. They are drilled to march with rhythmic precision, synchronizing breath with movement, minimizing wasted effort. This is not fitness as most imagine it. It is survival physiology, engineered to sustain the body in an environment actively trying to shut it down. But even the strongest body cannot endure without a resilient mind. Psychological training is perhaps the most critical aspect of Arctic preparation. The endless whiteness erodes perception, creating a phenomenon known as polar stress, where time blurs and motivation wanes. To combat this, commandos learn mental strategies to remain focused, visualization of objectives, breaking missions into manageable segments, and anchoring morale through camaraderie. They are taught to embrace discomfort, to accept pain as an inevitable companion, and to reframe suffering as proof of resilience. Instructors emphasize that fear and doubt are natural, but discipline transforms them into fuel for determination. Isolation compounds the challenge. Long stretches of Arctic operations are conducted in near-total darkness during the polar winter, when the sun disappears below the horizon for weeks at a time. Soldiers live in a suspended rhythm where day and night lose meaning. Fatigue blurs into monotony, and the psychological toll can be as devastating as frostbite. To endure, soldiers rely heavily on teamwork. Bonds forged in these conditions are unlike any other, absolute trust, where each member's survival depends on the vigilance and commitment of the others. A single mistake, forgetting to check a comrade's exposed skin, neglecting to rotate watch, failing to share warmth, can ripple into disaster for the entire unit. Stories from Arctic training often sound more like myths than reality, yet they are testaments to human adaptability. Accounts of soldiers skiing for days with minimal rest, hauling sleds heavier than themselves across blizzards, or plunging into icy rivers during drills and clawing their way back out to continue the mission illustrate the extremes of endurance demanded. One Norwegian trainee once described the process as learning to stop thinking about comfort entirely, to measure life only in forward steps, no matter how painful. These stories are not exaggerations, they are glimpses into the transformation required to become an Arctic commando. Nutrition and recovery also play into this human equation. Soldiers consume extraordinary amounts of calories, not as indulgence but as necessity to fuel bodies that burn energy at 4 times the normal rate. Sleep, scarce and fragile, is optimized through strict routines and rotation systems. Even rest becomes a skill, with soldiers training to fall asleep quickly and deeply, regardless of discomfort or noise, knowing that every minute of recovery matters. The body is treated as both weapon and machine, maintained, fueled, and driven to its absolute capacity. Perhaps the most defining element of the human experience in the Arctic is the acceptance of vulnerability. Soldiers are not invincible. They feel the cold, the hunger, the exhaustion. They know how close they live to the edge of collapse. Yet instead of breaking under this knowledge, they embrace it. Vulnerability becomes a teacher, stripping away arrogance and forging humility, sharpening focus on what truly matters: discipline, preparation, and solidarity. In that humility lies unmatched strength. The Arctic does not create superheroes. It creates ordinary men and women who have been honed through fire and frost until they can accomplish the extraordinary. Each soldier who endures this training carries proof that the human spirit can be shaped into something far more enduring than steel. Machines may fail, but the human will, when sharpened in this frozen crucible, becomes unbreakable. This is the human element of Arctic warfare. The ability to push beyond physical and mental boundaries, to endure where others collapse, and to rise each day with the certainty that survival is not enough. It must be mastery. Future of Arctic warfare. The Arctic has always been unforgiving, but in the 21st century it is becoming something more, a battleground of global significance. As ice sheets retreat and new shipping lanes emerge, The once isolated polar frontier is transforming into a stage for strategic rivalry. Nations are not only racing to claim untapped resources buried beneath the permafrost, but also preparing to secure dominance in a region that may soon dictate the balance of global power. For Arctic Commandos, this evolution is more than theoretical. Their training and expertise are rapidly becoming central to future conflicts in the coldest corners of the Earth. Climate change, paradoxically, is making the Arctic both more accessible and more dangerous. Melting ice has opened pathways for shipping and resource extraction, drawing the attention of powers from Russia and China to NATO allies and the United States. With opportunity comes tension. The Northwest Passage and Northern Sea Route could shorten global trade routes by thousands of kilometers, but whoever controls them holds immense leverage over international commerce. Military strategists know this well, and the presence of highly trained Arctic troops is now as much about deterrence as survival. Technology is also reshaping Arctic warfare. Drones, once limited by fragile batteries, are being engineered to withstand freezing temperatures, offering reconnaissance in conditions where human patrols risk death. Satellites provide real-time tracking of troop movements across the tundra, while advanced navigation systems counter the disorienting effects of whiteouts. Unmanned ground vehicles, designed with heated components and specialized treads, are being tested to carry supplies and heavy weapons through ice fields. Yet technology remains a double-edged sword. Machines may extend human reach, but the Arctic's brutal conditions ensure that reliance on them alone is a gamble. Nations are responding with a surge of Arctic-focused initiatives. Russia has reopened Soviet-era bases along its northern coast and deployed specialized Arctic brigades equipped with vehicles designed for polar terrain. Norway continues to refine its elite cold-weather units, ensuring NATO maintains a foothold in the region. Canada has bolstered its presence with Joint Task Force North, asserting sovereignty across the vast, sparsely populated tundra. Even countries without direct Arctic territory, such as China, are investing in research and projecting interest under the banner of near-Arctic states. The message is clear. The frozen north is no longer a void, but a contested theater where geopolitical stakes grow with each passing year. For Arctic Commandos, the future means adapting to a battlefield that is both ancient and modern. Their training will increasingly integrate cyber defense, satellite coordination, and joint operations with unmanned systems. Yet the essence of their role remains unchanged: to endure and fight where others cannot. They must still master the cold, the isolation, and the relentless physical toll of polar warfare, even as they learn to wield cutting-edge tools alongside traditional survival skills. In this duality, ancient resilience married to modern technology, the future Arctic soldier is being forged. The environment itself is also changing the nature of conflict. Thinner ice increases risks for transport, forcing commandos to innovate new methods for movement and supply. Seasonal variations grow more unpredictable, with sudden thaws and refreezes complicating operations. Commanders must plan with greater flexibility, aware that a single miscalculation in timing could strand units or destroy supply chains. In the Arctic of the future, adaptability will be as valuable as firepower. And beneath these practical considerations lies the deeper truth. The Arctic is becoming symbolic of a new era of competition. Unlike past wars fought for land or ideology, future struggles here will be for control of resources, trade routes, and influence in a region that humanity once believed too hostile to matter. The presence of Arctic Commandos serves as both shield and warning, a demonstration that nations are willing to invest in soldiers capable of turning the frozen frontier into a theater of strength. Yet for all the focus on strategy, the essence of the Arctic battle remains unchanged. It is still a place where cold punishes mistakes, where endurance determines survival, and where the human spirit is tested beyond measure. The future may bring drones, satellites, and advanced vehicles, but in the end, victory will still depend on the grit of the soldier trudging through snow, carrying the weight of survival on his back, and facing the storm with unbreakable resolve. The Arctic frontier is no longer remote. It is rising to the center of global attention, a frozen crucible where nations measure their strength and soldiers prove their limits. And in this coming age of rivalry and transformation, the Arctic Commando will remain at the forefront, a reminder that in the coldest corners of the Earth, only the toughest prevail. The Cold Frontier. In the end, the story of the Arctic Commandos is more than a tale of soldiers braving freezing winds and endless nights. It is the story of human endurance taken to its absolute limit, of warriors who step into an environment designed to destroy them and somehow make it their proving ground. The Arctic does not forgive weakness. It does not compromise. It strips away illusions until only strength, discipline, and sheer willpower remain. For most, the frozen wilderness is a place to avoid. For these elite soldiers, it is the ultimate arena where they refine their craft and demonstrate the true depth of human resilience. Throughout history, armies have trained to fight in deserts, jungles, and cities. Yet the Arctic stands apart as a battlefield where even the most advanced machines falter and where the elements themselves become a relentless enemy. To operate here is to confront nature's full fury. Winds that slice through layers of clothing, ice that can shatter steel, and a silence so vast it becomes oppressive. And still, these commandos push forward, adapting not only their weapons and tactics, but also their minds and bodies to a theater of war that feels alien to human existence. The legacy of Arctic warfare is written in hardship and sacrifice. From World War II campaigns in the frozen north to Cold War exercises under the Northern Lights, soldiers have long understood that dominance in this unforgiving region requires something beyond conventional training. Today's Arctic commandos inherit that legacy, building upon it with cutting-edge technology, specialized conditioning, and a brotherhood forged in temperatures that would drive most to collapse. Their story is one of continuity, ancient struggles against cold and hunger, now fused with modern strategies and geopolitical stakes. For as much as this environment tests the individual, it also tests nations. The Arctic is no longer a blank space on the map. It is a frontier rich with resources, crisscrossed by emerging shipping lanes and watched closely by global powers eager to extend their influence. Behind every frost-covered rifle sight and every snow-camouflaged unit lies a much larger struggle for dominance in a region that could define the balance of power in the decades to come. The commandos training in the blizzards are not simply preparing for survival, they are preparing to secure national interests in one of the most strategic landscapes on Earth. But beyond politics and power struggles lies the human truth, that these soldiers embody the limits of what men and women can achieve when pushed to the very edge. They endure the crushing weight of isolation, the constant threat of hypothermia, the monotony of white horizons stretching endlessly in every direction. And yet, they rise each day, not because it is easy, but because it is their duty. They prove, time and again, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to march forward into the cold despite it. As the camera pulls back from the snowfields and the howling winds fade into silence, one image remains: the lone figure of a commando moving steadily through the frozen expanse. Every step is a defiance of nature's attempt to stop him. Every breath is a declaration of resilience. And behind that solitary silhouette stands an entire brotherhood of warriors who have turned the Arctic into their crucible. The future may bring new technologies, new threats, and new reasons for nations to stake their claims in the far north. But one thing will never change: the need for soldiers capable of thriving where others cannot, of carrying the torch of human endurance into a realm defined by ice and shadow. These are the Arctic Commandos, and their story is far from over. So as you reflect on the extremes of their training, remember this: the cold frontier is not just a place on the map. It is a test of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions imaginable, resilience, courage, and unity can carve out survival and victory. And if you've been captivated by this glimpse into the frozen battlefields of the Arctic, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for the next journey into the hidden world of military secrets. The story of warfare is written not only in deserts and cities, but also here, on the edge of the world, in the endless ice, where only the toughest dare to tread.